I'm Ramin Alasko, and I'm going to be talking about the negative and harmful impact of gender roles. So, to start us off, I'm going to be talking about how gender roles often manifest in really negative ways throughout our youth. But before I get into that, I'm going to share a little bit about the history of gender roles. Gender roles are often rooted in misogyny, as many of us have experienced. And eventually it would lead to the feminist movement, not only of the 21st century, but also with women's suffrage and big feminist movements in the 1900s. In modern times, we often see gender roles heavily pushed on us through our advertisement. So, for an example, if you were to walk into a Target and go to the shampoos, you will often see that the women's shampoo has very light colors, pastel pink, pastel blue, pastel purples, with the base color being white. Meanwhile, men's shampoos often has a base color of black or navy blue with accenting gray or green colors. And despite the fact that, these two shampoos are the same exact type of shampoo from the same brand, depending on the gender it targets, it has very, very different connotations and associations with that item. So some common stereotypes that we see is that women are caretakers, sensitive, soft-spoken, often indecisive or complicated, while men are breadwinners, very tough, athletic, and natural leaders. Unfortunately, the negative impact of these roles often begins in childhood. So gender roles are taught to children by their parents and their environment. Parents are the first introduction that children have to gender and relationships. Children who are raised in a household that hold these toxic views with gender and relationships will often grow up to have those same types of toxic views for themselves and their own families. For example, in a family in which a mother does not work, does not bring in any income, and is not allowed to do so, will often raise their daughters to be wives rather than individuals. And on the flip side, households where the father is not very expressive, is very strict, and does not allow for any type of vulnerability will often inhibit the emotional development of their sons. And children really begin to see the differentiation between what they're taught at home versus how other people are taught in school. And they begin to form their own understanding of their own gender and what's associated with their own gender. So we see this where, a lot of the boys tend to play together on the playground, the girls tend to stick with the girls. Girls can't get dirty, or, they can't play with particular toys or video games, while boys aren't really allowed to, play with dolls, things of that nature, or wear pink. And when a child has particular desires that go against what they're told, um, they often become confused because they cannot express themselves in the way that many adults can. And so because of that, this confusion and like discomfort is often expressed in very negative ways, such as bullying. And in extreme cases, especially in older children, like high schoolers, you will see very, very bad cases of like homophobic bullying, sexism, and things of that nature. And unfortunately, this does not stop in childhood. Many adults carry these types of behaviors and types of discomfort and confusion into their own adulthood. Gender roles often constrict women and arguably impact women the most. It prevents them from seeking their own autonomy and self expression by centering men around their lives. And when male sexuality is forced upon women, it takes away their own right to their body and often feeds into rape culture. And this type of behavior and thinking enforces male dominance over women, which is a very misogynistic viewpoint that many people unfortunately still have. And it over sexualizes women and reduces their importance to their anatomy, often ignoring their own preferences or comfort, which goes back into feeding into rape culture and things of that nature. However, it also does impact men. You know, men are supposed to be dominant figures in a patriarchal society, and gender roles often encourage, if not breed, low self esteem and aggressive behavior in men. Society tends to effeminate men who aren't dominant or do not wish to be dominant, which leads to these men overcompensating, which we often see take the form of toxic masculinity. A lot of men often feel that they need to be violent, that they need to be aggressive, that they need to exhibit certain negative behaviors in order to be taken seriously in their own communities. And unfortunately, this heavily discourages men from seeking help with mental health, and it heavily discourages them from expressing their own emotions and vulnerability. So, what can we do about this? Well, the first step will be to deconstruct your understanding of gender and your own gender, right? Gender roles stunt the growth of not only children, but our peers and of ourselves. The long-lasting effects of sexism and gender roles often contributes to low self-esteem and deteriorating mental health in our communities. And the change begins with unlearning your bias. No matter how much you advocate for equality, no progress can be made if you do not know what you're advocating for. None of us have lived in a time in which gender norms have not impacted us, even if the impact seems insignificant to you. Once a person picks apart their foundation of the beliefs and traditions that they hold, they can truly begin to move forward. And through this, we can raise our future generations under the knowledge that their gender does not impact the way they live or express themselves. And this path is not a linear or very clear one. However, it is possible.